The CDC has now put a moratorium on evictions, and it's very confusing because I know there are guidelines for tenants. I know there are guidelines for landlords. So what does that mean exactly here in Texas?
Yeah, so we've had an awful lot of eviction moratoriums and eviction potential moratoriums, depending on what counties and cities and things like that you're in. Fortunately, Texas is a much more landlord-friendly state than a lot of states. I mean, if you're in California, I can't even imagine. I don't even know if you're allowed to evict anybody before the CDC moratorium. So fortunately, we're not in that kind of situation. But so at the end of July, July 25th is when the CARES Act, the initial CARES Act eviction moratorium ran out. And that was specific to government-backed, government-related mortgages. So if you had a VA loan, if you had Section 8 housing type tenant, things like that, FHA loans, things like that, then you were prevented from evicting a tenant. That ran out, but then President Trump signed a different agreement or a different executive order basically extending that. And then the state of Texas also in August kind of reiterated, well, we're still going to kind of follow the CARES Act, but you can give a 30-day notice to vacate and then go with eviction proceedings after that point, which is much longer than the typical 3-day notice to vacate. So that was all kind of CARES Act related. Honestly, that all runs out here pretty soon at the end of September. And I'm sure there'll be another iteration of it, don't get me wrong. But now, then what happened at the beginning of September is something actually completely separate from all of that, which was kind of the White House and the CDC, Controlled Disease Commission. Am I saying that right? Yeah, I can't remember, the Controlled Disease Commission. But basically, the CDC came out in conjunction with the White House saying that they had the power to have a completely new eviction moratorium. And the big thing about this one was that it was applicable to all properties. So it doesn't matter if it's a government, VA, Section 8, anything like that. It doesn't matter what kind of mortgage was behind it or if you have no mortgage whatsoever. The CDC's moratorium came out and extended the eviction moratorium to all properties across the board. Now, the complication with this one, and one of the big differences, is that the responsibility actually is not necessarily on the landlord to prove that that they're able to do this, but it's actually on the tenant. The tenant has to actually show that they meet a handful of criteria, including that they make less than $99,000 per year, that they have used their best efforts to make rent payments, that if they are evicted, that they will be at risk of becoming homeless or have to live with others in kind of cramped, close quarters. So, the onus is on the actual tenant to provide that information to the landlord and to the courts in order to prevent them from being evicted. There's a lot of really controversy about, well, what qualifies as that they have used, best efforts to seek assistance and to pay their rent. What kind of evidence do they actually have to show? That's all pretty pretty difficult to say at this point. But at least if you're the landlord trying to evict somebody, at least the onus is not on you to show that you've asked those questions. It's really just to say that I have not received information that says otherwise. Now, if you're in a situation where you are going to an eviction court and you're trying to go through that process and the tenant has provided you with anything, you do have to disclose that to the courts, even if it's something that you think is I'll say completely BS. If you don't think that there's anything founded behind that, you still are required to report to the court that your tenant has made a claim that's along those lines. And then it's basically up to the court to make a judgment on that. So it certainly complicates things. And that is, by the way, this new CDC eviction moratorium is through the end of this year. So it definitely prolongs things pretty severely. So it definitely complicates things, but at least on the positive side of things, it doesn't mean if you're a landlord that you can't evict somebody. It just means that there's another added level of complication, and that that if the tenant that you have is providing that information, you do have to disclose that as part of the process.